to Roadmap MBA. My name is Ashleigh King and I'm so excited to be with you today, joining you on the screen. I guess it would be great to know if you're watching, where you're watching from. Please do drop us a wave in the comments and let us know who you are and where you're watching from. So it's really great to be here. It's my first live stream of the year. I've been a guest presenter for the Roadmap MBA for almost a year. So I first had my first guest presenting last March, and I'm really excited to still be doing it. So I've got a great topic for us today. It's all about goal setting, what to do when things go wrong around goal setting, and I think it's a really valuable topic for January because a lot of people have set their New Year's resolutions and maybe they've already quit them. So that's why I chose that topic. So it's really nice to see you if you're watching. Thanks so much for tuning in. So yeah, so if you haven't met me before, or this is the first time you're watching this live stream, I know we're reaching people all over the world. My name is Ash, so Ashleigh King. So I am a guest presenter for the Roadmap MBA. I'm also the founder and creative director of Flamingo Heights podcast studio. So I have my own podcast studio in the Oosburn of Newcastle upon Tyne. I'm also the host of the Nurture Your Zest podcast, which I love to do. It's really such a big passion of mine, and I get to chat to really cool people from all walks of life. So it's great to see you. I always say, you know, for anyone watching, if you have any questions you'd like me to answer, as in any, well, during the show as well, but any topics you want me to cover in the future, let me know because I cover things every fortnight. So hi Simon, great to see you. I'll wave back, and funny to think of you leaning out of the window, don't fall out. But yeah, if you'd like me to cover any topics in future, let me know. A lot of my topics tend to cover neurodiversity. I'm somebody who has ADHD and also PTSD, so it's I usually have a very different perspective to some of my colleagues who present on this show. So it's really great to be here, and also I talk a lot about entrepreneurship and being a creative, as you could probably tell by my wacky clothes. So great to see you, Paul. Yeah, it's exciting to have been doing this for almost a year, and I still get nervous every time. But yeah, it's great to hear you want to hear about goal setting. I'm really looking forward to having you here, and thanks for commenting. So it's true, you do need goals to help you get to where you want to go. So before I dive into goal setting, I wanted to share a couple of bits about what I've been up to. So I've been doing what I love best. I've been event planning a lot recently, and so my mom's just turned 60, which is amazing. I can't believe she looks so amazing for 60. When I was younger, I had a very different perspective of what 60 might look like. And my dad's also turned 60, so it's quite a big time of, you know, big number birthdays in our family. We've got a 30th coming up and a 40th, so really exciting big birthdays. So for those of you who don't know my story, you might watch some reruns and kind of hear more about it, but I used to do events as a business, so that was my bread and butter, and I just never worked out how to make it a viable business. So to be able to do something that I love, like organise an event for my mom, we had a surprise party for her over the weekend, and it was just so nice to do something really special that I enjoy. For anyone interested, I'm not planning to become an event planner again. I might run my own events, but I really love what I'm doing at the moment, which is focusing on public speaking or podcasting or training. So, and it's funny to see some of the comments. Yes, Simon, you are the same age as my parents, which is funny. They say that you know, you get mentors at all walks of life. So it's really great to have you as one of mine. I also wanted to share that I am now a cartoon along with my colleagues. So Steve and myself and Ifeanyi, also known as Tony, the three of us are now a cartoon. So as you might be aware, we're three presenters for the Roadmap MBA. So Roadmap MBA was founded by Steve Pugh. We're now in over 42 countries. We've recently expanded into Tunisia, Czech Republic, as well as Qatar. So it's quite amazing to see these countries growing all the time, and I'm so excited to be part of this journey. So if you haven't checked it out yet, you can get your Roadmap MBA resources online, so check it out. It's a really great program and some amazing free resources that you can access. So we're on a mission to help people around the world to build a better life for themselves and create an accessible platform for all communities to thrive and celebrate together. So we'd love to have you on that journey with us. So go and create your free account and you can just explore the resources. There are other options. You can actually pay it forward as well. So if you'd like to sponsor someone's learning journey, you can do that too. But yes, we are cartoons and I'm very excited to see more of that. So I wanted to chat about a few personal things before we dive into the topic. So in terms of, I've mentioned what I've been up to, but I also wanted to just touch on the cost of living crisis. So as you know, I've mentioned I'm an entrepreneur. I cover all kinds of topics. And one of the ones I really wanted to cover is some of the discussions I've been having privately with some of my friends who are also entrepreneurs at the moment around the cost of living crisis. So many of us who are self-employed are really struggling with huge bills. And I think that's fair to say everybody around the world has got their own set of unique circumstances where, recovering as a nation, but actually it's our global citizenship. All of us around the world are recovering from the fallout of the pandemic, the world being closed down in many ways for a long time, recessions, lots of economic challenges, but also fuel and the war in Ukraine. So as an entrepreneur, I'm very aware that I choose to be one. And I've been thinking recently, well, should I maybe get a job? Is that something I should do? And I think a lot of people who choose to be a business owner think about that. And I was offered a job or I was told about a really fantastic job yesterday, great salary, something I could walk into and do tomorrow. And I know I'd do really well in it. And I thought to myself, but if I go and do that, then I'm just going to lose all of the work and all of the traction and momentum that I've put into what I'm doing at the moment. And I would feel like I was letting myself down because I put so much into the people and the communities that I'm working with. And so I think there's this thing at the moment of how can you make extra cash? What can you do as a side hustle? How can you upskill yourself? And that's why I'm so grateful for things like the Roadmap MBA, where you can learn on demand in your own time, but also where you can reflect and really push yourself through new things. I think it's important to talk about the value of reaching out. So whether you're at work or whether you're self-employed, it's really important to talk to people, whether it's your friends, your family. And I feel like I'm really fortunate to have an amazing group of entrepreneurs around me. So I've got a picture here of myself and some of my friends. We're in a mastermind. We meet once a month and we just chat about things we're going through and we help each other. Also, there are people that I really look up to. There's so many people who aren't pictured here. Steve Pugh's one of them. But for instance, Alfie Joey, I had the fortune of recently interviewing him. He's been someone I've had on my dream list of podcast guests for about 3 or 4 years. And I can't believe that I got to interview him recently, and it was just such a special interview. And, I've got lots of people I look up to, and I got to interview so many cool people last year. But one of them, a friend of mine now and client, Doug Dinwiddie from White Digital, said something that I really, really valued. So when I was thinking, should I get a job? What should I do? How can I save money? I was thinking, well, could I apply for different loans? Could I do different things? How can I be more efficient as a business? And I was just talking through this with various different leaders and mentors I look up to. But Doug said something that really caught me by surprise, and I've been thinking about it a lot. And that's the idea that actually I'm in a really privileged place right now, because what I'm doing is I'm being forced to be efficient with my business. So I'm being forced to learn how to manage my cash flow as, doing as much as I can with as little budget as I can. And what that means is it's really, really helpful because it helps you to prioritize. It helps you to become leaner. So for anyone who's looked at lean, ways of managing things, lean ways of doing things, it actually really, really helps you to make sure that you can run your business well. So before you scale, you actually can run a business well at the level you're at. And so I was so grateful for that advice, because it means that rather than dive into loans or debt or any of these things, which I don't want to do, I thought it was really cool that this is a great opportunity for me to learn how to do things with less. And I think this is a really cool story to just springboard onto this goal of today, which is goal setting. Because if we can do things, tiny little improvements all the time, that can impact our wider goals, which we're going to talk about. So great comments coming in. Thank you so much to everyone who's commenting. Really nice to see them. Really nice to see you here, Jess. Thanks for listening. Eve and Jess, I'd love to hear more about Ambitious Women in Essex. Thanks so much for commenting. Fab. Okay. So I'm going to dive into the topic. Please do share your thoughts. I'm going to be talking about goal setting, as I mentioned. Okay, so today's agenda, I'm not really one for agendas, but I do like to kind of give an oversight of, or an insight into what I'm going to be talking about. So I'll be talking a little bit about fixed and growth mindset, a little bit about the amygdala hijack and what that is and how it impacts you in goal setting, tips for managing your mindset, how to prioritize tasks and say no. And I'm just going to share my thoughts around these themes and how they've shown up for me in my business, and hopefully give you some great tools around this. So I would like to ask you, and you can comment on this or you can, think out loud to yourself, but have you ever set a goal that you achieved? When you set that goal, what did you do? What went well? What was really, really fundamental about your success? But also, have you ever set a goal that you did not achieve, that just didn't work out? What went wrong? And did you step in the way? Did you hold yourself back, or was it external factors? Was that goal realistic? Why did that goal not quite work out? So you can share any of your thoughts or experiences if you want to in the chat. But I'd like to ask you that question just going in. It's really useful to see some of the comments as well, people sharing their thoughts and goals and experiences. It's great to hear about resources like Agile and Lean Six. It is a very, very valuable tool, and I'm actually going to be sharing some of my favorite books around mindset and goals in a moment. So one of the things that I discovered a few years ago, which I'd love to tell you about, is a one word for the year. So it was actually my friend Anne English who came on my podcast, and she talked about this idea of having a one word for the year. And so my word for this year is build. So that's more of a focus on my business. So if I'm honest, and I always like to be honest in these chats because otherwise it's not really fair to give you a perspective that isn't real. I've also written these on the board as well. But my word for my business this year is build. I want to build a business that's sustainable, that will be, able to withstand any of the challenges that many of us are going through at the moment, that will be able to grow with the right people, the right procedures, the right things in place. And that means that sometimes I have to slow down to grow. I have to build foundations, and I have to learn as well and hold myself accountable. Sometimes I'm not the right person to do a particular task and I need to get someone else in. My other word for the year is peace. So that's something I wanted to share with you. So peace is more about my personal life. I want to prioritize peace in my personal relationships, my family relationships, my friendships, but also the clients that I work with. I want to make sure that they're the right fit because it's important to me to look after myself as well. So what are your one words? Has anyone got something where they've got a broader theme that's helping to motivate them for the year? I know that lots of people have started to post around this, and I've got some great friends who are sharing that they're doing family or gratitude or different words, and I always find it interesting the different things that people feel motivated by. For me, having a word that I can put over the year where I can think, well, hang on, does that fit with my goal? Actually, if I do this one action, is it going to take me towards or away from what I want to do? And that helps me sometimes when I want to sabotage my behavior. So, okay, with all change comes a growth curve. So when I was looking and researching for this topic and thinking about what to cover, I was thinking about the words goal, and I was thinking about, well, what is a goal? How do you define a goal? And I was reading all these different things and listening to all these podcasts. And one of the things that I found really interesting was the idea that a goal is to do something different to what you've been doing. So there's actually a sense of a change of behavior. You have to actually do something differently to get to a place. So usually if we do something differently, we have a change of behavior. So we have a period of growth, and that can mean that there's a growth curve sometimes. So some of my favorite books, which I wanted to tell you about, are Mindset by Carol Dweck, who I'll be talking about in a little while, Atomic Habits by James Clear, I love that book, Grit by Angela Duckworth, and Start With Why is one of my absolute favorites by Simon Sinek. So it's great to see some of the comments as well coming up where people are suggesting their own favorite books as well. And if you've got any that you think I've missed on growth curve, mindset, goal setting, please drop them, because I'm always looking for good reading recommendations. It's great to hear people in the chat as well talking about their goals, but also what their one word might be, the thing that will help them to feel focused this year. So if we look at growth and we look at the idea of having a goal, sometimes we meet our goals, sometimes we don't. Sometimes it just becomes too difficult to do our goals. So I'd like to talk, well, what is a fixed or a growth mindset? So the key person who's written in this area is Carol Dweck, who I mentioned before, wrote a book called Mindset. So she wrote her book in 2006. I also found a paper for those of you who are more academically focused or who are maybe studying for an MBA or similar. There's a great paper which is created by Insights, and it's about mindset matters, and it's examining the difference between fixed mindset and growth mindset in 2021. So there's so much writing about fixed and growth mindset, but what I wanted to say as a very simplistic way of explaining it is that with a fixed mindset, you're looking at talent and intelligence is fixed. So this person has done well because they have an innate talent or ability to do something. With growth mindset, anything can be learned, any intelligence can be developed, talents can be developed through practice, through skills. So you can often look at different languages that are used. And if you do some research around this, there's so many great language swaps that you can bring into your vocabulary. But the one that I like is, if you're thinking, I don't know how to do this, there's a great coach in my LinkedIn community who lives locally to me as well. Her name's Teresa Peters, but she always talks about the word yet. I don't know how to do this yet. So we could say, instead of I don't know how to do this, it could be, I'm not sure how to do this yet, but I've figured stuff out before, so I know I can figure this out too. So that's a great way to look at that. So yeah, I think those are some of my favorites around growth mindset, some of my thoughts. But there's so many language tricks and hacks if you look into that topic that I'd recommend. So why does it matter whether you have a fixed or a growth mindset? Well, if you already believe when you set a goal that things are hard, or it just is this way because it is this way, it's going to be very difficult for you to meet your goals. So what I really like about a growth mindset is sometimes our goals aren't quite the right fit. And so we can adjust and tweak them and actually recalibrate. And that helps us sometimes to get on an even better path than where we thought we wanted to be. I wanted to talk about one of the hardest years of my life, which was my Master's in Business Administration at Newcastle University Business School. So I went into the program knowing it would be intense, knowing it would be tough. However, one of the things that I didn't expect was that we would go through a global pandemic, and that as a president of the TEDx Newcastle University Society, the performance and conference that I put so much effort into, I had to postpone, and it was really hard to work through that. So one of the things I'd written in my diary when I felt so stressed was, this is literally very similar to what I'd written in my own diary. When I graduate, I will listen to the click of my heels as I walk along the floor, waiting for my peers' names to be called. I will walk over, I will shake the Vice-Chancellor's hand, and I will feel so proud of myself for reaching this moment. I know I can do this, love Ash. And this is, like I say, pretty much a word for word, something that was in my diary. And I would write this every single day, and I would sometimes write this multiple times a day as an affirmation. And I think that was a tricky year, but also it was the greatest initiation in learning. And I couldn't have done it without my friends and the people around me. But sometimes we have a goal and we think it's straightforward, like I want to study a master's in business administration. Okay, what do I need to do? Well, I need to go to class, I need to sit down, I need to study, I need to make time to study, I need to do X and Y and Z. So I really feel that I thought I had it all figured out. In fact, I went into that program thinking I knew everything. And I came out thinking, who am I? What have I done? It was a really interesting time. And that's why I think it's really important to explore some of the other things I'm going to tell you about today. So we all have our own goals, but sometimes what can happen is we can have sabotage, and that can be self-sabotage. And you know, that can also be around something we call the amygdala hijack. So when I was studying my master's, I was working so hard to run my business, which was an events company that wasn't really working. I was a president of a student society of 150 society members. I had a team of 15, a committee that were all volunteers that I was leading. And I was working and I was doing a full-time MBA. So most people don't work at all when they do a full-time MBA at a university. So immediately I had created barriers for myself by giving myself too much work, by making it too complicated. And I've actually noticed that's quite a pattern in my life, to overcomplicate things more than I need to. And what happened during the MBA is I found out that I have ADHD, so attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. And that was such a unique thing to learn about myself, but it was also very helpful because it helped me to understand that maybe some of those self-sabotage patterns weren't actually my fault. They were part of my brain chemistry, and maybe there were things I could tweak and improve. I think what I wanted to think about here is, are there goals that you've set for yourself that aren't actually things that you really want to do? If it's not part of your why, as Simon Sinek would say, you're not going to do it. So this is really, really interesting about why we sabotage ourselves. So through my research, I found an interesting thing called the amygdala hijack. So if you have heard of the word amygdala before, it's a part of your brain which is to do with your prefrontal cortex. I don't want to get too scientific because it's not my zone of genius, but what I will say is that there is an idea that we have a flight or fight response. We know this from biology and evolutionary behavior studies. And sometimes you may be triggered through something that comes up where your emotional controls will take over and you'll respond emotionally because you might be frightened. Something has affected you in some way and you're not thinking in your normal lateral way of thinking. So actually, Daniel Goleman, the author, coined this phrase in 1995, emotional intelligence. And he talked about the amygdala hijack. But it's interesting that in recent research, as recent as 2022, we're finding that actually the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex can work together to help us navigate a complex world. So without one or the other, we would be lost and make poor decisions. So this idea that we have a hijack and all of a sudden our resources are gone isn't necessarily true. So I found it interesting that Carol Dweck, who spoke about mindset and who I mentioned before about mindset, they wrote a really interesting paper. It is quite academic. It's up to you whether you want to explore it or not. But I think it's really interesting when you look at books or topics, and you'll do this if you study, any master's degree, you do have to be critical about what you're reading and get a balanced point of view. So I thought it was interesting that those two contradict each other. I wanted to take a moment to look at some of the comments coming in, and it's great to hear of how people have written letters to themselves, which talks, it's something we talk about a lot in goal setting, which is about visualizing. It's about rehearsing mentally for activities and actually planning for them. Something that I wanted to tell you about is when I went through the experience of preparing for my master's and doing the master's, I was so excited about that moment when I walked across the stage and I had my name called out and I shook the Vice Chancellor's hand and I got my degree and I could say, I am Ashleigh King and I have an MBA. what was really interesting is there's something called the arrival fallacy. And I had never heard of that before. And I only heard about it when I was reading about this recently. And so arrival fallacy is an illusion. Once we make it, once we get to that holy grail, that goal, where we reach our destination, we will reach lasting happiness. And this is from a book called Happier, The Secrets to Daily Joy and Lasting Fulfillment, by a Harvard psychologist, Tal Ben-Shahar. I thought this was a really, really interesting concept because I can see this so many times in my life where I've thought, oh, okay, if I do this thing, I'll be great. I've got it all sorted. I'll have reached where I wanted to go. And actually, the arrival fallacy, I can look back so many times and think I was just chasing the next goal, the next dream. And actually, I wasn't enjoying the moments or the steps that I was learning in the meantime. I recently went to TEDx Newcastle for a series of talks to watch them. I was actually helping behind the scenes. And one of the speakers spoke about this. So one of the best rowers in the world, if you hear some of the stories of great top athletes who've accomplished incredible feats, but once they've actually reached that climax, that pinnacle of their career, and they've met everything that they've worked towards, you know, they've dieted, they've been through coaching, they've rehearsed over and over and over getting to this goal, and then it happens, and then they feel this emptiness. You know, what do I do now? I don't have any sense of purpose. I don't have any goals because I've met the goal. So this was really, really interesting to me, the arrival fallacy. I wonder, have you heard about it? Is it new to you too? It's very true. Some of the comments coming in about always chasing goals can lead to unhappiness, and it's about the journey, not the destination. I guess that's an interesting point of view because some people do prefer the destination. So I think that can be a personal one and sometimes around people's values. But I think there's certainly a beauty in the journey that maybe we don't always see. I'm loving to see as well the ideas of different books. The Chimp Paradox is another one of my favorites, Jess. It's lovely to hear you recommend it. Please share any more. I need to reread that one. So another interesting thing that the same author who spoke about the arrival fallacy and wrote the book Happier said is that goal hunting activities actually activate the brain's reward centers and deliver a daily sense of accomplishment. So I found this fascinating. So what he's saying is that people with goals actually have more meaning in their life. And I was wondering about that because if we consider something like Maslow's hierarchy of needs or something like that, wouldn't you say that having goals is perhaps a luxury? Because if you've got all your basics sorted, you have your food over your head, you have your food in your house, you have clothing on, you have a roof over your head, all of these basic things, when those are sorted, you can then think about your industrial things like having a job and how you can contribute to society. And only then perhaps people might think about the luxury of a goal or a dream. So I do wonder about that, and I'm curious about your thoughts on that. What do you think? Do people with goals have more meaning? It's this idea that really has had me thinking a lot the last few days, because I'm thinking, well, actually, all the times I felt stuck in my life, I have felt like I didn't have a goal, I didn't have a purpose, I didn't have something I was aiming for. And one of the things I also discovered is that if you have goals that aren't for you, they're actually goals for other people out of obligation. So goals that you think you should do, like I should lose weight because then I will make this person happy, or if I go to the gym, then that will make this person happy, or whatever it might be. I think it's important to think about why we have these goals. And yeah, I'm really curious about people's thoughts on whether people with goals have more meaning and whether goals are a luxury in the first place. I like Steve's point about the struggle of the moment. I have to be honest, I think I'm much more about the journey than the destination. But it's only something I've recently understood. So I love Mel Robbins. You may have heard about her. She is a coach and author. She's got a podcast. I love podcasts, as you probably know, because I'm a podcaster myself. But some of the top mistakes that people make when making goals, according to Mel Robbins and some fabulous esteemed academics that she mentioned, are mistake one: we get so focused on the how that we don't even think about the why. I think this is really important. I know that I do this sometimes. Sometimes we forget to really think about why it's important, why it matters, what are we doing, how does that affect our lives? I think this can also happen in organizations and in organizational culture where we may have huge strategic change programs, but we talk about the how, but not the why, and we lose our staff along the way. Another mistake can be setting too many goals at once. So if you keep it simple and you have one thing or up to 3 things that you're aiming towards, it's so much easier than trying to pay off all of your debt and lose weight and get a new job and go to see your family every single day or call your nana every weekend. You know, it's better to have 1 or 2 or 3 goals, or even better to have smaller habits that you can do daily that can improve your chances of success. Another mistake that we can make is that goals are too big. And I loved what Mel said about this. So she said that your dreams should be big. Your dreams should be aspirational. They should be, you know, really motivating, something that you can live for, that get you excited. And your dreams are something that can be so big. Some you might share, some you might not. They might be so personal to you, but your dreams are important. But it's actually, your dreams are big, but your goals are small, because you have to break those goals into small, achievable chunks. So you might have heard about the SMART way of setting goals: small, measurable, achievable, hang on, I've said it wrong, specific, not small, but specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and there's a time deadline around them. And those are so important as well. I think mistake 4 as well is really interesting. So a goal can be too general. So I know a lot of people at the moment have set lots of goals. One that I hear all the time is, I'm going to do dry January, so I'm going to give up alcohol for January, and that's quite a common one for many people in January. And lots of people might have quit by day 3 because it doesn't feel like maybe they want to do it. It's maybe because everyone else is doing it, so I feel like I should, or I've had too much indulgence over Christmas, so I think I'll take some time off. And Mel Robbins actually talked about this in her podcast and said, well, a year is too long to take time away from alcohol. But for her, if she said 75 days, she's going to do 75 days without booze, that was a really interesting thing, because it's not too general. It has a specific time and date and time frame around it. But she also has a why. And she's saying, well, actually, I want to be more present in my life. I want to have more focus and clarity. So I thought that was really interesting. I wonder, have you ever made a mistake when you've set a goal? I know for me, I've definitely made all of these mistakes here. And I found that more than ever, I've actually been better at goal setting recently, because I have explored my why. There's a great person I follow, well, 2 people that come to mind. I really like to explore thought leaders in the creative sector, but also the tech sector. So one is Dan Martell. He has ADHD like me. He's a really successful, millionaire business owner, and he helps people to be better at scaling their startup, particularly SaaS founders, so software as a service. But what I love is, despite his ADHD, he's found all these systems and solutions that work for him and work with his brain. And so he's got a great book called Buy Back Your Time. That's something I'm reading at the moment. I'm really enjoying it. There's another guy called TK Cater, who I learnt about recently, or I've been actually following him for a while, but he has something called Unstoppable Sundays on YouTube, and I follow that. But what I've been able to learn is, at the start of the year, I did this whole reflection piece, but I also wrote my plan for the year, and then I broke it down into smaller bits, into daily actionable habits. And I found this resource that he had so useful. So do check those 2 out if you've got time. I think it's important when we think about goals to think about how you can meet them for you. So some people will have a way of doing them, and it could be as simple as just write it down and do it. There is research that says writing your goals down does have a massive effect on whether you actually reach them or not. We've got some comments coming in about bullet journaling being great for busy minds. I love writing. It really is how I get things out of my head. I think sometimes for some people, they'll write them down, and I do this sometimes, and then I'll forget about it, and then I'll find it a year later, and I've actually completed those goals, but perhaps I could have reached them earlier if I'd remembered. So I think it's important to reflect and check in, and perhaps having a quarterly review or a fortnightly review or things like that. If you can, make them visual, or write affirmations, or do what you can to help you achieve your goals. So some people might use a Trello board, or you might use a star chart or a habit tracker. There's actually an app that I totally love. It's called Fabulous. Check it out if you can. It's a very unique experience, and I think if you're a creative, it's a great one to try, because you can add all your habits that you want to develop, whether it's, remembering to do the dishes before bed, or do one household chore a day, or limit your TV time, or whatever it might be. It helps you to track all of your things, but it also helps you to learn more about yourself and why you might sabotage things or how to reach your goals. I find it really fun tool. It's one of my favorites. So often when we think about setting a goal, we set the goal, but we don't really want to actually do that activity. We might think we want it, but we don't really care about the work that's involved. So an example that Mel Robbins talked about in her podcast was, she loves people who have a six-pack. She looks at women with a six-pack and thinks, oh my gosh, how am I, 54 years old, or I think that's how old she is, and I don't have a six-pack, and these other women who are my age, they look amazing. How do they have the six-pack? And the thing is, she said, well, for years that was her goal, was to somehow go to the gym all the time, cut out all her carbs, do loads of cardio, and get a six-pack. And then she realized, well, why? Can't she admire women who have a six-pack? But for her, it's not a huge priority. It's not in line with her goals. It's not congruent with what she wants to do. And so that helped me a lot as well to think about, because I think sometimes we can have goals that we make for other people that aren't right for ourselves. And so, for instance, I was talking at the start of this session about how I would love to, be really financially free, and it's scary right now being an entrepreneur and being a business owner. So maybe it would be great for me to get a job. But my goal is to help people to share their stories with the world through the medium of podcasting. And I'm doing that right now. And if I leave and went into a job, I might not have the opportunity to do that, at least not in the way that I want. So I have to think about the greater vision of what I want and what's my why. And I encourage you to do that too. But it is true that we do need to know the why, but also the how. We need to think about the habits we can bring in every day and the systems. That's why I love James Clear's book, Atomic Habits, because it really does break down how you can make tiny micro changes in your life, which will help to improve your performance, but also just improve your life overall. So if you can't perform, and if you are really stuck, I did want to say that tiny micro habits can get you back on track. So I'll tell you some of my goals and how this has worked for me this year. So I started the year thinking, okay, every night I was going to journal, I was going to not spend any time on my phone playing games, I was going to do X and Y and Z, I would always go to bed with a clean and tidy house. And some of those things I've been able to do well, and some I just haven't because I've been busy, or I've been tired, or haven't slept well, or whatever it is. So despite my best efforts, I might have left my lunch at home. So I didn't eat a home-cooked meal that day, and maybe I had to buy a sandwich. What I find is that actually zooming out and going, well, okay, which area of my life did I want to work on this week? Okay, well, this is a priority for me right now, but that one's actually not so big a deal. So looking at your life more holistically, are there times where maybe health will be more important, but actually another time where there is a really important crunch time at work, maybe you won't sleep as well. So you know that in that week, your nutrition is going to be more important, or maybe you need to make sure you go for a run to help with your stress. So I think it's important to zoom out and give yourself grace and think, okay, well, maybe I didn't get this thing quite right, but I can improve for next time. It's about readjusting and recalibrating. So we sometimes define our goals, but sometimes the treasure is when we redefine, when we reevaluate and go through it again. And try again. We've had a comment today that somebody's word was try. That's a great word. So, you need to do what's right for you. And I think it's important as well when we talk about goals. For many people, goals are a luxury. So I've been learning more and more about accessibility at the moment, about disabilities. It's something I didn't know much about. I guess as I've realized I'm neurodiverse, I'm learning about other parts of accessibility and things that people might find difficult that I find easy and take for granted. And I think what I found really interesting is that with having an ADHD brain, I can create all of these wonderful ideas, but I might forget about them the next day or even the next minute. And that's why, again, I do find that tiny micro goals helpful and habits, but also tracking them in a way that I can, really keep myself focused and motivated really helps me. So I hope some of those tips help you. And if you've got tips as well on how to keep yourself motivated, how to stay focused on your goals, please do let me know in the comments. It's also interesting to hear if anyone is, if they've started a goal and maybe quit it already at this time of the year. So, and that's where I want to end for today. So I want to thank you for your time. I am a guest presenter for the Roadmap MBA every second Tuesday. So every 2 weeks I come in and I share a new topic. I'm looking for topic ideas. I haven't thought about what I'm going to do next time. So if you've got any ideas that you'd like me to cover, please let me know. I've talked about things in the past like time management. I've talked about women and access to funding. I've talked about being neurodiverse. I've talked about podcasting. I've talked a bit about marketing, social enterprise. I'd love to hear your thoughts. So please drop me any feedback, any ideas. It was great to see you. Do check out the Roadmap MBA. If you haven't already got a copy, you can get an online access to online resources for free. And there are other resources you can look at. So thank you so much. And I hope to see you in 2 weeks' time. Bye.